In the final days of her reign, Cleopatra sat in her dim, marble chamber within the crumbling palace of Alexandria. Outside, the footsteps of marching Roman soldiers echoed like the last beats of a dying heart. She was no longer a queen draped in gold and adoration. She was a prisoner in her own empire. The scent of jasmine, once a symbol of her seductive power, now mixed with fear. News had reached her: Mark Antony was dead. And Octavian, heir to Caesar and her enemy, had surrounded the city. The end had arrived. She stood before the bronze mirror, brushing her raven hair one last time. Her eyes, once able to sway kings and gods, were hollow with dread and defiance. "They will not parade me through Rome," she whispered. Years earlier, Cleopatra had ruled not with armies alone, but with wit and beauty. She and Mark Antony were more than lovers, they were a force of nature. Together they defied Rome, imagining a new empire built from east and west. But Rome could never tolerate a woman who ruled like a man. At the Battle of Actium their combined fleets were crushed. Antony fell on his sword after hearing a false rumor of her death. His blood had barely dried when her guards carried him to her. He died in her arms, whispering, "Live. Oh, avenge." Octavian's legions stormed the city. Streets once echoing with music and debate now screamed with fire and death. Alexandria's great library, a sanctuary of knowledge, was set ablaze. Cleopatra, hidden in her mausoleum temple, received the reports: thousands slaughtered, children taken, nobles fleeing or captured. She held her children close, promising them that they would not live as Roman trophies. But promises, like kingdoms, were fragile. Inside the sealed tomb, Cleopatra met with her closest servants. She refused Octavian's summons. Poison was her weapon of choice, always subtle, always effective. A small vial passed between her fingers as she weighed her fate. One whispered of a serpent, a sacred Egyptian asp. Death by its venom was said to be painless, royal. She gazed toward the horizon. The sun was setting. So was her time. Cleopatra waited in the heavy silence of her sealed mausoleum, the stone walls still echoing with the distant drums of conquest. She had prepared for death, but now a new sound crept into the chamber, the approach of boots, steady and deliberate. Not Octavian himself, but one of his men had come. The door creaked open. A Roman envoy stepped in, stoic, armored, and perfumed in power. He looked down at the woman who once ruled the Nile. "You will be taken to Rome. You will kneel before Octavian. The people will cheer your fall." Cleopatra remained seated, her spine straight, her chin lifted. Her gaze did not falter. "Rome has had its victory," she said, "but it will never wear my crown." A silence hung in the air like incense smoke. The envoy clenched his jaw, turned and left. Outside the guards whispered, some with pity, others with pride. None dared look her in the eyes. Cleopatra had just refused the world's most powerful empire. She bathed in silence, perfumed her skin with lotus oil, slipped into a dress of soft white linen, woven with threads of gold. The diadem on her brow bore no jewels, only memory. Cleopatra had made her decision. Her servants, Iras and Charmian, waited beside her, loyal to the end. They said no words. They didn't need to. Laid gently on a platter was a small woven basket. Inside, coiled in the hush of shadows, was Egypt's ancient guardian, the asp. Some say she pressed it to her breast, others claim she let it strike her wrist. Or perhaps it was poisoned from a comb. What mattered was not the method, but the message. When the Romans burst in hours later, they found a scene of terrible beauty. Cleopatra lay in death as she lived in life, composed, fierce, unforgettable. A queen by her own command. The news arrived in Rome like thunder on a clear day. Octavian stood before the Senate with Cleopatra's death scroll in his hand. "The Queen of Egypt is dead," he announced, his voice cold. Officially it was suicide. But whispers traveled faster than proclamations. Some claimed the asp was a myth, that Octavian ordered her silent execution. Others believed she died nobly, choosing dignity over chains. The truth blurred. But the image, the queen with a serpent, was too perfect for poets to resist. Rome etched her into legend not to honor her, but to control her. They thought they'd buried her. But they'd only made her immortal. After Cleopatra's death, Egypt fell silent. But her children remained. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was taken, and never seen again. The boy king erased. Her twins with Mark Antony Alexander and Cleopatra Selene, were marched into Rome, trophies of victory. But Selene endured. Under Roman custody she learned their language, wore their clothes. But her heart beat with the memory of Nile and Pallas. She married Juba, king of Mauritania, and together they ruled. Yet even there, far from Alexandria, she built temples to Isis, painted lotus flowers on palace walls. She was a queen born of two worlds. And in the dust of conquest she carved a legacy of her own. Time swallowed the sands of Egypt. The stones of Alexandria crumbled. Cleopatra's tomb was never found. Some say it lies beneath the sea, guarded by silence and myth. But her story survived. Not through the scrolls of victors but in whispers, paintings, poems. A queen who dared to love, dared to rule, and dared to die on her own terms. Was it poison? A snake? A secret blade? The truth matters less than the flame she lit. Even now, thousands of years later, her name evokes power, beauty, danger. Not a fallen monarch. A legend reborn again and again, every time someone says her name.